of practice. Let me introduce myself. I am Carla Guerrero. I'm economist. I have a master in corporate finance, and I'm now studying social service work for immigrants and refugees. I have more than 12 years of experience working with the communities in Latin America and in the Caribbean, in living in extreme conditions. And I have been working with Randy during this year in the Toronto Impact Initiative. Today, I will be supporting you with the questions, so please feel free to send me any question that you have in the chat or raise your hand anytime that you need it. So thank you very much, and over to you, Randy.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Carla. I'd like to welcome you all to the inaugural Toronto Impact Initiative Community of Practice. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, please. In terms of introductions, my name is Randy Tirata. I'm the manager of the Toronto Impact Initiative. I have worked in the Toronto's community sector for close on to 20 years now. I can't believe it. And I really relish this opportunity to bring social finance into the space, with the important caveat, though, that community be involved in a really authentic way. So, and then importantly, moving to our definition of a community of practice. Now, there's many definitions out there, but here we take it quite literally. We seek today to allow you to meet and to talk to somebody or somebodies that you've never, crossed paths with before, perhaps. And we seek to keep everything really that we do in our presentations, in our questions and the breakout room activities to be really as practical as possible. So community of practice, the community is you, and the practices are really those practices that we develop together, practices that we develop together that will lead to the creation and design of a really truly community-based social finance fund. And with that, I am going to tell you that I am working on a land known as Tkaronto. I am a third-generation Japanese-Canadian settler. And although I mark World War II internment of the Japanese Canadians and racist legislation by the Canadian state as top of mind for me, I nonetheless am a settler with class, gender, heterosexist privileges that remain a key focus of struggle as I also continue to do work on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat. It's now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We also acknowledge that the current treaty holders are the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. The Wampum Belt Covenant is the agreement to peaceably share this area and care of this whole Great Lakes region. And, as we work together to really develop a community-based social finance model, we really can't forget the significant impact of colonization, really, and on the ongoing struggles faced by Indigenous communities. And there's some really great work being done by Indigenous social impact funds. But I think we're here to witness the continuing struggles and hardships of urban Indigenous in our city. And community-based social finance needs really to take this into account today as we move forward together. So do you do the agenda, Carla, and then we'll move to slide principles? Is that how we're going to do it? Okay.
Yes, Randy, thank you. Okay. I'm going to mention quickly, we are going to continue with a Catalyst Summit video. Then we are going to share with our guest speaker, Wayne Miranda. Then we have a space for questions. Around 2:50, we are going to have a great activity in the breakout rooms. And we will finish our session by sharing back and closing remarks. Over to you,
Okay,
Randy.
thanks. So before starting our conversation, I just want to establish some guiding principles to ensure that we really have a productive and a respectful session. So we really need to create a safe space for honest and open communication. So let's respect each other by listening without interrupting and valuing, different opinions. Participation is voluntary, but we really encourage everyone to active participation. Now, there's many ways to actively participate. You can put up your virtual hand there, the Zoom little things there. You can unmute yourself and happily interject at any time. Or you can place your thoughts in the chat as well. So, and or all of those above. We're all equals here. Our voice matters, and everyone will be given the chance to speak. So thanks for your participation. And let's really have a great session today. So the Catalyst Community Finance Initiative, they have a video on their website that really in less than 2 minutes provides a really nice overview of community finance. And our guest speaker today is also part of the Catalyst Community Finance Initiative. Wayne Miranda will take us even deeper into this, but this quick video, less than 2 minutes, gives a really nice quick overview. I'm going to throw it over. I'm going to stop sharing now and throw it over to Carla, and she was going to share the video with us.
Okay, thank you, Randy.
I don't know where exactly, but in I don't know
Have you ever wondered how to drive positive change in your community? Well, let's explore community finance, where social impact meets money. Social purpose organizations are often the leaders of positive change in community. While investment capital, like loans, can amplify their impact, banks are reluctant to invest in these organizations. This is why community finance tailors its capital to diverse community needs and closes this vital investment gap. Take, for instance, a place-based impact fund. Impact funds link investors, social purpose organizations, and finance tools, offering expertise and investment to maximize social impact in a specific geographical area. A community loan fund is an example of community finance that provides low-interest loans to small businesses and nonprofits, empowering local entrepreneurs and change makers. Another example of community finance is an investment cooperative, where community members come together to invest collectively in projects they believe in. And let's not forget that community finance has a long history in many cultures around the world, including initiatives like rotating savings and credit associations, where groups of people pool their savings and each take turns using the pot of funds for their enterprising activities or personal needs. In essence, community finance nurtures local initiatives, fosters resilience, and builds a brighter world for all. So, whether you're an individual or a business, consider getting involved in community finance and become part of a movement that empowers positive change right here at home. Learn more at Catalyst Community Finance. Together, we can finance a brighter future for everyone.
Okay, great. Okay, now I'm going to. Okay, hope you enjoyed that nice short. Okay, we're going to move from passive to active, at least 1 minute active. 1 minute active. We would like to take just a general pulse of the community on where it ranks, different categories of investment. That sounds hard, but it's just a simple ranking of 4. We also want to hear about any community initiatives or projects or ventures that, anything significant that possibly could be replicated or scaled or funded. So Carla is going to put in the chat, or if you have your cameras on you, there's a QR code. But Carla, if you could put in the chat the link, it's a quick 3 questions, 1 minute survey, and then we're going to head straight to Wayne Miranda right after that.
Now you have the link on the chat.
Thanks, everyone. And we'll just give them, how are we doing for time? We're doing great for time. Okay, I'll just give you, a couple of minutes for that. No rush. If I were a Zoom expert, I'd be playing music right now, but I don't know how to do that. I'm going to have to ask Carol again. How's the chat looking, Carla? Yeah, okay, good. Okay, Okay, I'm going to give them, because we're good on time here, so I'm going to give them, well, 1 more minute. Yeah, we're good on time, so 1 more minute would be fine. So if we quickly wrap up, we'll have about 30 seconds. If we could. But thanks for doing the survey. It's always helpful to know where a community sits on these questions. Okay, in about 10 seconds, we'll go. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And we are now going to swing on over to our guest speaker, Wayne Miranda. If you don't know who Wayne is, you've got quite the gift ahead of you. And I seriously, sincerely mean that. Wayne is the founder of Weselium, working towards equitable capital flow to underserved groups across Canada. Presently, he works with Bowen Social Impact to help develop the social finance ecosystem. And he works with Catalyst Community Finance to build the community finance sector. And that he really does. He just was the lead organizer of the Catalyst Community Finance Summit in Saskatoon that went off just last week to huge success. Wayne was previously the founder and CEO of Growth Mosaic in West Africa, now Marepa. It's now called Marepa Capital. He was the Director of Growth at the Center for Social Innovation, CSI, which I'm a big fan of. He's Managing Director. He was Managing Director of TechSoup Canada. He was the Social Finance Lead at McConnell Foundation and has worked in social finance and social innovation policy at the Government of Canada. So when Wayne is not in Zoom calls, you can find Wayne running around with his dog Nayla or dreaming of the next backcountry lake to paddle. And I don't doubt that at all from his nice headshot there. So Wayne, I'm going to take it now over to you.
Thanks, Randall, and welcome everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And apologies if my voice feels a little bit difficult to hear, but just let me know if it's unclear. After Randall and I, and I think at least maybe one or two others who I see in the participants list came back from Saskatoon, I think that'll caught up with me. So I've got a little bit of congestion. So apologies if you can't hear me. Just interject or write in the chat or put up your hand if you're not understanding anything. So Randall, yeah, if you don't mind advancing the slide. So I thought I would just try to share a little bit of information first about just like what is social finance? What is this thing that we're talking about here? And I often refer to social finance as a means to an end. So finance, resources, funds, that's not the point of why it is that we are here. The point is that we want to see our biggest challenges solved. We want to see climate resiliency. We want to see food security. We want to see social equality. We want to see, a whole bunch of things. And so social finance is a means towards those ends. And generally speaking, social finance, when I use the term, I refer to repayable investment. And I'll come back to some examples of that. But it's not just any repayable investment, it's repayable investment that specifically tries to solve those problems that we were just talking about. So, tries to generate specifically a positive social, environmental, or cultural impact at the end of the day. And so next slide, please. So we'll go through a few, different just common examples that you might see here. So, repayable investment is actually fairly common and, familiar, I would imagine. So, you and I, consumers, we might have a credit card on us and we might use that to buy things like food at the grocery store or clothes at the mall or, just fun experiences like, I don't know, comedy shows or the movies or whatever. And do you want to buy that today? And so, you kind of use your credit card, you have that experience or you buy that food and you eat it. And then a month later, generally speaking, you're going to pay back that credit card bill to the credit card company. So that's just a very basic example of how finance enables us to do what we need to do today and then pay back later. And homeowners do this all the time. So, if some of us at least are privileged enough to be a homeowner, most likely you have used a mortgage to buy that home. So we don't actually own that home outright. Our name might be on it, but the bank more or less kind of owns that. And you're paying back the bank or you're paying back that credit union or you're paying back that mortgage provider on an ongoing basis over many years. And so this is, again, enables us to get that shelter for our families that we need today. We can't wait 20 years. We can't wait 25 years to kind of have a shelter. So we use financing, we use mortgages to kind of meet that need today and then pay back over a period of time. And small businesses do this all the time as well. They might access a small business loan to buy the raw materials or to buy the equipment that they need to just run their business. And then they repay that loan over a period of time. So, repayable investment, it doesn't have to be too scary. It's probably more familiar and you probably use it all the time and perhaps just never really think about it. So I'll go through a few different examples of how organizations use that in the next slide. So I'll go through 5 different examples and just generally speaking, that ended up being a bit small. Apologies for that on the left-hand side there. But those 5 categories are purchasing an asset. The next one down will be how do we spend now so that we can actually earn revenue or earn funds later. The third one that I'll talk about is how do we spend now so that we can actually prevent future costs from being incurred. And then you can also use repayable investment to launch business or launch a social enterprise in particular. And you may also use social finance to scale an existing social enterprise. So I'll go through these examples step by step. So the first example is actually just YWCA here in Toronto. And they use social finance to purchase an asset. So in particular, they raised a $1 million community bond, and they used that community bond towards building affordable housing. And they rented this affordable housing to low-income women, women facing mental health issues, and female-led Indigenous families. And so what they do, what YWCA does, is they use government rent supplements to make up the difference between what those residents can pay and what the market rate is, so that they can actually repay their community bond. And in this case, they were repaying that over 10 years. And various different foundations, I think, for instance, I believe it was Toronto Foundation came into this particular bond in a big way. The next example, Randall, if you don't mind going to the next slide, is an example of spending money now so that you can actually earn revenue later. So this is an organization based out of Hamilton called Center 3 for Print and Media Arts. And they raised $35,000 as a loan, and they used that to hire capacity. So they hired a development officer. And what this development officer did was they went out and, they knew they had donations and pledges and different donors that were just on the cusp of providing, funding. But this organization sort of needed capacity to kind of go out there and sort of secure it. And so the development officer raised money to both repay the loan, and in this case, the loan came from Community Forward Fund, which is one of the existing social finance investors, fund intermediaries, as it's called. And not only did they repay the loan, the development officer also generated, sort of like the Holy Grail, the unrestricted funds, so that the organization could put those unrestricted funds to support the mission and generally, whatever would best support that mission. And in this case, what Center 3 did was they ran art circles. And so they created a membership program, and they offered ongoing workshops and classes to the community in Hamilton. And so that was also a revenue generating sort of activity as well. So it wasn't obnoxiously expensive, but they used the repayable investment. They hired staff capacity. They repaid the loan, and now they have great programming in addition because they have that additional capacity. So really interesting use of repayable investment. On to the next slide, please. So this example is one of where you invest today, you spend some money now, and then you prevent future costs from happening. So the Harbourfront Center, some of us might be familiar with them. It's a cultural hub here in Toronto. They raised $95,000 from the Atmospheric Fund, and they used that money to upgrade to LED lighting, so higher efficiency and greater durability lighting, as well as they installed a more efficient boiler for their heating and cooling, or rather just heating, I think in this case. And so this energy efficiency retrofit reduced their monthly utility costs. And so they ended up saving money on an ongoing basis. And so then a portion of those savings that were generated on this ongoing basis went to repay that $95,000 loan. So this is a class example, lots of energy retrofit examples where you have to invest to kind of generate savings. And in so doing, you can repay back a loan. Did I see someone unmute? Okay, we can go forward then. So this next example is a bit of a shift. So far we've been talking a bit about, kind of just what's called cash flow financing. So where we have a set of expenses and we need to spend some money now, and we know there's, sort of revenue or income coming on the backside of that where, it's going to eventually cover those expenses. Social enterprise is a little bit of a different sort of ballgame. Social enterprise is actually trying to, you could still be a nonprofit, or you could be a charity, or you could be a small business. But what you're trying to do is provide a good or service for some sort of revenue generating, or there's some sort of price, or there's some sort of cost to that good or service. And in so doing, you're generating revenue, you're generating income, and the good or service is in and of itself having an impact. So in this case, this organization called Rhythm, based in Alberta, is a social enterprise in the arts and culture space. And so they use hand drums as kind of a cultural element, and they teach kindergarten to grade 12 students about music and about community building. And they raised money from a fund called Social Enterprise Fund, also based in Alberta. And they used that to purchase instruments, to purchase more drums, and they began offering online teacher training as well. And so they then used those workshops and those training revenues towards repaying their investment. And I believe, I could be mistaken, but I think they've like fully repaid the investment, and they're off to the races now with exciting new programming. So this is an example of using repayable investment to actually launch an entirely new social enterprise. In this case, it's the provision of workshops or training as that service. And if we go to the next slide, this is an example of using social finance to scale an existing social enterprise. So a group called Anamiki Indigenous Technology is a digital services agency. So they build websites, they have a really interesting Indigenous data sovereignty product. They do custom software development, digital communications. They do a whole suite of different things, design and branding. So this is an existing company, and they're looking to expand their impact. And they come at sort of digital services, and they look at their role as a firm, first and foremost, as towards Indigenous economic reconciliation. So everyone that they've hired, the management, the leadership, is all led by Indigenous individuals, I believe from across Turtle Island. And so in this case, they raised $1 million. So $750,000 of that was as equity financing from a investor called Raven Indigenous Capital Partners. And then they raised another $250,000 from BDC. And they had a particular Indigenous entrepreneur loan program. And they used this $1 million to build out the team. They built out new products, I think inclusive of that Indigenous sovereignty, data sovereignty product. And then those service revenues, so that their clients who pay them for the custom software, the clients who pay them for communications, marketing campaigns, for design and branding services, those service revenues will then repay this equity financing investment. And so those are just 5 examples of real life, existing organizations that are out there in Canada using social finance to expand their social and environmental purpose. And if we go to the next slide, please. And so, kind of in summary, I think the idea is that we've got these big challenges, I don't need to repeat them here, but the idea is, climate is a key issue. People need affordable housing. We hear that every day. People need good quality food. People want social equity. The sort of crux of this is that we can't just wait 20 years for all of the different funding to come through for these challenges to be solved. We need investment to solve these challenges today. And so this type of social finance mechanism enables the positive change today, and also enables us to do that by tapping into these vast financial markets, sort of like financial markets that are sort of managing trillions of dollars. And if we go to the next slide, which is maybe amongst last one. So then, we've just talked about, maybe I'll just pause there actually for a quick second and say, I've just chatted about 5 different examples and some sort of level setting or definitions of what is social finance and what is it that we're talking about, before I kind of jump into like, how does this all really fit? Like, why am I talking about this in the context of the Toronto Impact Initiative and in the context of this community of practice? Any questions so far? about what is social finance? What does that mean? What does that look like? Who's using it? Any questions so far? All right, seeing none, that's okay. It's great. And just know the chat is available to you, or feel free to use the Zoom functions. Thank you, Carla. So, okay, let's continue on. So, we chatted about those 5 examples of social finance. How does this all fit into the Toronto Impact Initiative, and kind of what are we trying to do today? So if we go to the next slide, please. So the Toronto Impact Initiative is really kind of trying to do this. The vision is, how do we co-develop together? This is all of us here on this call. How do we co-develop a community-led, community-governed fund? So a social finance fund that invests for the benefit of underserved and overlooked communities in Toronto. So those that would otherwise lack access to capital. How do we develop a mechanism that we get to govern ourselves? So we're not at the sort of, we're not at, we don't have to sort of wait for others to kind of make decisions on our behalf. We're sort of participating in how those decisions get made. We're not starting to think, oh, this fund doesn't really, I don't really fit in with this fund for 1 or 2 reasons, because we will co-develop it ourselves. So if we go over to the next slide, and I think what we're trying to do is like, how do we co-develop how this social finance actually then works for us? So when I contrast how traditional investment works to how we'd love to see the Toronto Impact Initiative work, when I think about traditional investment, finance, which tends to have a bad reputation for good reason, it's because it just maximizes profit. Maximizes profit at all costs in often cases. Often the decision making is top down. It's often just really focused on competition and just being competitive, and it's kind of this perhaps brutal or hostile environment. It tends to be all about individuals and individuals accumulating as opposed to sort of communities flowing, and it's really one that has dominated and in so many ways decimated nature. Whereas the Toronto Impact Initiative is really trying to maximize social and environmental impact. And sure, we need to maintain financial sustainability. So we can't, continue our social and environmental impact work if it doesn't exist anymore because it's, out of business or it's bankrupt or whatever. But the point isn't profit. At best, profit is just a mechanism to enable to continue to do that work. And it's not top down, it's trying to be actively participatory. How do we collectively make decisions that, we are best positioned to make? And it's not meant to be competitive necessarily so much as it is collaborative. How do we build partnerships and meaningful relationships so that we can do this work together? And it's less about each individual and much more about the community, and in particular, communities that have otherwise been marginalized or excluded from traditional markets. And instead of dominating nature, we can see the wisdom in nature and learn from it and integrate the knowledge that sort of nature affords us. And I see a question from Jeswinder about a recording. I do believe, Randall, if you can just confirm, or if Carla can confirm, that this is being recorded, and we can share that. Yeah, I see Randall's nodding his head. So Jeswinder, all good. Apologies, you're having computer issues. And I think that was it for me. So if we go to the next slide, I think that was all. So if there's any questions for me.
I will start off as people ruminate over the possible questions for Wayne here. Wayne, of your 5 examples that you gave, Were there any other possibilities that lay in wait that you haven't mentioned that are still maybe possibilities that the Toronto Impact Initiative as a starting fund could pursue? And if not, of the 5 examples you gave us, which one do you think for our starting fund gives us the best possibility to hit the ground running?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't know if I've got a good answer to that. I mean, I think maybe if I read between the lines, maybe the question that I can answer is, are those 5 examples the be all end all? Is that all that social finance can do? And to that, I can confidently say no. I think there's so many different examples out there and probably needs and use cases for social finance that will look different and be different from those 5 examples. And that's okay, and that's great. I think the point is social finance wants to be responsive to those needs and fit with what the community is actually going to be looking at and what initiatives and what sort of financing and appropriate financing would be needed. So I think, that would be my answer. On how to get us started, actually, I think the what I think we're looking for in this engagement process, and I think Randall, you've got slides upcoming on sort of what that process looks like. We want to hear from the community on what those priorities are. And some of those projects or some of those needs, if we could surface that through these communities of practice, if we can identify them, sort of be in relationship with them, we'll have a much better understanding as to how this fund can be formed to respond to those different needs. And then I do see Annabelle's got a question, but if you had a follow-up.
Oh, yeah. If anyone had a follow-up to the last question, please go ahead.
Seems like the floor is yours, Annabelle. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a great presentation, Wayne. I appreciate it. It's really interesting. I was curious, so I can see that this is kind of like the starting point for the Toronto Impact Initiative. And so I don't want to get like too deep in like maybe the more detailed questions I have about it. But I was curious, to kind of understand if there were types of projects, and I can appreciate that you're saying that it's, community co-designed and community developed. But based on some of the examples that you've shared, which I noted were connected to like infrastructure upgrades, including like real estate purchases as well, like with the YWCA example. I was wondering if there are particular examples of what you imagine the fund paying for, because for example, at United Way, obviously something that's really needed in community is funding for service delivery, and in particular multi-year funding for service delivery and for programs. And so I just was curious if this would be an avenue for that, for like program development, or if it's a little bit more focused on like capital investments or larger projects. And again, I know it's early on, and I realize that there's an aspect of community development in this, so you might not be able to answer this, but I'm especially curious about the kind of like multi-year potential for commitment, because I think for a lot of agencies, having that kind of flexibility to repay a loan over, like a flexible amount of time would be important.
Yeah, excellent question. I love it. And I love where it's coming from as well. Like, how does this type of fund mechanism really respond to what those types of organizations, those charities, nonprofits, cooperatives, be it what have you, like how does it respond to their actual needs? And so, yeah, I think your intuition is right. I don't think we have the answer to that yet. But I do think the intention is how do we build the flexibility in the fund to respond to those types of needs? So, what I can mention is this going to be predominantly a grant funding mechanism? And the answer will be probably not. So, sort of the nature of grant funding is that people will likely apply, they'll get sort of non-repayable capital, and they'll go off and do that sort of activity or that program. But there won't necessarily be a mechanism for them to repay the grant in any way or nor would there have been an expectation. So this fund isn't necessarily going to do that. I do think there's a real need for that. Don't get me wrong. And I think this fund can have some element of grants, but it's not going to be predominantly grants. It will predominantly try to be what I would call integrated capital. So it's going to look across all the different financial tools, from grants to cheap loans to what I would maybe say is market rate loans to tools such as revenue-based financing. And apologies if this is kind of like over people's heads language never perhaps you've heard before, and that's okay. All of this in time. These are all words that we will get to know together. And you know, and as well as like maybe equity investment. So equity investment, think, you know, Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, but like not sharks. So, you know, I think there's a whole bunch of different financial tools out there, and we just want to understand how can they be used appropriately in different cases. So if there's a charity out there that wants to explore and wants to experiment, excuse me, with you know, they've identified some community needs and they've maybe got a sense of programming that could work and solve those needs or meet those needs. But it's, you know, notoriously difficult to raise experimental money. You know, I think if we could imagine that there is a revenue-based mechanism out there, like, you know, maybe there's a program that is in relation to, say, workforce development, just as an example. I'm not saying this is what's out there or what we'd only fund. And that workforce development program could perhaps have some sort of income stream because employers see the value in it. They want to finance that at the end of the day, but you know, it sort of like is one of those situations where it takes money to make that money. So they need funds to build out the program, to hire the staff, to implement the actual workshops or what have you, to go out and recruit the employers. And then the employers will be in a position because they've got really interesting and good talent to say, okay, you know, we can pay you for this now. So it's one of those cases where it takes money to sort of make that money. That could be an interesting investment opportunity for a fund like this, where, you know, it's probably unlikely that that charity or that nonprofit can go to a credit union or could go to a bank and get that type of financing, to get a loan, to start up that type of social enterprise activity, even if there could actually be a real opportunity there. So this fund would try to sort of, you know, bridge the gap between, you know, them not getting that type of capital from a traditional bank because it might be perceived to be too high risk or too early stage or not quite quote unquote bankable. Whereas we see the opportunity because our own community sees the opportunity, and our own community is actually adjudicating and making that decision on, yeah, that's a priority for us. We think this is worthy. We think this could have some good financial results and performance, but also the impact is going to be undeniable. So, you know, if the community is making the decision, that's what we're trying to do in this fund. I don't know if that tries to address your question. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. So I can kind of imagine that, like, you know, creating a social enterprise or I can kind of see how the Toronto Impact Fund might be like a middleman or kind of a replacement for banks, because it would kind of remove some barriers that not-for-profits might experience in, you know, applying for loans or mortgages. I am curious if, hopefully I'm not losing my train of thought. Shoot, sorry. I had a question, but I just lost it. Maybe I'll put it in the chat if I remember. Thank you though, that was helpful, Wayne.
Yeah, anytime. And even if anyone thinks of questions now or afterwards, and, you know, I'm sure Randall, Carla, myself, anyone at Niche, sorry, that's North York Community House, would be more than welcoming of your questions. So anytime.
No, Wayne,
Yes,
in the 2 minute. Oh, sorry. Does somebody have a question?
Yeah,
I do see a
wonderful.
question or a hand up from Favor. Are you up?
Great. Go ahead,
Yes.
Carla.
Yeah, I have a question. My name is Favor Ayola. And my question is that, is there any basic training that is required to be able to access this opportunity? Are there trainings or workshops and that will make one enlightened to be part of the funding?
Good question. Yeah, I think this has come up a couple times now, Randall. And so, I think the process, and this might soon be an interesting segue over to you, Randall. I think the process is we're trying to hear these types of requests and these types of needs so that it can be integrated into the actual fund design. So, to answer your question, I don't think we've figured that out yet, but I think we're hearing a pattern of that type of need, and maybe we build it into the fund design going forward. So, I don't know if that answers your question directly, but thank you for that input at least.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
just pipe in. Favor Iola, that's a great question. And I,
Could I just add something? My name
yes,
is
please.
Diana.
Go
I
ahead,
think this is
Diana.
where, hi, I think this is where like the bank comes in and they have a workshop, because like Royal Bank, they have a workshop on finances every month and stuff like that. So if we could incorporate these businesses and institutions to help us as a community, because that's how we're going to grow, because we're all in it together and we're all working together.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There must be understanding so that it will grant everyone an understanding of how it works.
Yes, and just to follow up on both Favor, Iola, and Diana, I totally agree with both of them, what they said. There will be absolutely importance of supports in place, and to use a term called investment readiness, meaning let's not repeat some of the practices where a lot of people were turned away from traditional institutions, perhaps because they were deemed not ready. I know my work with this fund, we're not going to reproduce practices that in a way have called for the necessity of work that we're doing now, which means including communities. We're not going to reproduce the very practices that have excluded communities from finance and investing. So we're very well aware of being able to be approachable and being able to help with the capacity development of a lot of organizations and local businesses and individuals that need that initial support. We're very well aware of that and want to bake that in to the fund as well.
Randall,
Carla,
we have one more question. Katie,
okay.
could you ask, please? Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much for the presentation and the information. Really appreciate the conversation so far. My name's Kadeen. I'm a community person, so I don't represent necessarily an agency in this space, but I would just suggest as we continue to have this conversation and work collaboratively to build out what this fund looks like and how it would operate and serve our communities. I think it's really important, or at least valuable for some of us in the space, to have case studies that really look at the social enterprise or the small entrepreneur and what their experience through the process will be. The examples that you offered really are wonderful, but to me, they look and focus on the organization or the agency that has a finance department, probably lawyers and other things that are there to support whatever their investments are, and as well have a financial plan for how the repayment of those loans will look. So for the community person who is a small business entrepreneur, and I think this is where Favor just commented, the need for the workshops and the development is really to support that individual who's like, yes, this is how I, choose to have an income or sustain my life. But really the capacity to do that in this market and with all the awarenesses and competencies that we need, of course, have to be supported. So I think it would be really useful as a part of the learning to understand how the community member, the individual, and what their journey through this process might look like, different from the organization or, you know, the not-for-profit that is looking for other ways to build their investments and serve their communities. So not really a question, but certainly just a comment, and thank you for all the information. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kadeen. Yeah, that's well heard. Well, I know we might almost be out of time, and I think Randall, you might have some additional slides.
Randy, you're in mute.
Sorry. Yes, I just wanted to respond to Kadeen. Case studies, community person, small business entrepreneur, definitely. We'll be looking for those. And also importantly, what is the journey of the community member through the Toronto Impact Initiative? We don't know. We need the community members to tell us what is their journey they want through this impact fund. How do they want to initiate it and start it, their journey through it? What avenues do they need? What channels of supports do they need? And what type of patience do they need in terms of training and in terms of the type of capital they may be receiving? It's called patient capital in terms, but then we're going a bit down, further down the road in another community of practice where we'll be asking you precisely those questions. I want to then, and please, if you have more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We're saving the chat and we'll follow up in the next community of practice as we review what we've got today and as we move forward. This is the timeline. Here's where we are and here's where we are headed. We started with our information session back in March, but we continue the information sessions on an ad hoc basis. Today is June 5th. We have begun our community practice sessions. We'll be working together over these 4 sessions, with each session really building slowly on the previous session. They call it iteration, they call it iterating. It's, you know, we're just building on previous sessions and building up. And we'll be landing eventually on the community pieces of the investment fund by September. And let's say late October, early November, one design session, we'll probably put some last community pieces into place, but more on that later in terms here. And I just want to quickly go through this. This is the rough breakdown of the community of practice process. I mentioned our community practice really wants to be about community and to be practical. Ask practical questions and really get some great answers back that we bake into the process. Roughly our 4 sessions will really be broken down this way. Each session will have a leading questions that we're asking community to collectively answer. There are 4 basic, you know, categories we're looking for community feedback. Each of these questions answered as best we can. You know, each of the questions answered provides us with a community-based knowledge about a community-based component piece to the design of the fund. You know, for example, let's take a look at number 3, community practice 3, the ecosystem. For example, in this 3rd session, we really hope to walk out of this session with an idea of as Kadeen and a number of others mentioned, what types of support services are needed for ventures, early stage, you know, or otherwise, right? And an idea of, you know, where on the continuum, or a sliding scale, in other words, does the community stand? Where do you want to stand when it comes to investing in new initiatives or working with proven revenue streams? I kind of was knocking at the door in some of the questions Wayne was answering. For example, some proven revenue streams, some, you know, 1 year of proven revenues, that's similar to the Thrive Impact Funds. Those are the ventures they initially work with. Or on session 4, if we look under financial, we would love to walk out of that community practice session with an idea of what does community-based due diligence look like? I mean, you know, that the screen or the test of who's eligible for some of these community impact investments, and what do they need to bring to the table? But we need community-based risk assessment. We need community-based risk assessment tools. We know what the CIBC risk assessment tool looks like. Nothing against the CIBC, but we know what standard bank risk assessment tools look like, and they may decline many community members, but we can guess closely. But what does ours look like? Okay, now I'm rambling, sorry. But that's essentially the questions we ask, leading questions from each of the community practice sessions. And remember, the answers we get back, we just circle back, we review, we build up, and then we bring it back to the next community practice. So, great, and we're just a bit behind time, so I'm going to rush. This is our community practice. I'll read. This is the goal of the session, Willie, to hear your voice. We would like all of you together to create a general story or narrative out of this bundle of questions. Really, it's a bundle of questions, and use these questions just as a guide with your group to discuss. I just want to read them over to you quickly. What outcomes do we value most for a community-based social finance fund? What does successful community social finance fund look like? That's probably the same question, just worded differently, kind of. Who are the people or entities receiving investments? That's up to you. We want to hear from you. Who do you think should be receiving investments? And what are the investments for? These are open-ended questions. No subject matter experts here. We're not asking for expert answers, right? We're asking for community members to reflect themselves, their knowledge, their lived experience, and the answers. So each breakout room, or the 3 breakout room, I don't know what Carol's going to do, but you're going to get both of these, the 1Q and 2Q. So whom do we want to most support with this capital? Geographies or neighborhoods, or right? The demographic. What are the demographics? The types. What are the characteristics of the people or organizations or startups that we want to attract? The venture type. I'll leave you to define what venture means to you and the venture stage. So without much ado, Carla will put these questions in the chat so that the 1Q and 2Qs will be answered by your group. And then we'll have a report back, please. And if you have any scribes or note takers, please put your notes in the chat for everyone to see. That would be great. That would be great if you want to have someone put the notes in the chat in real time. And I'm going to now turn it over to Carla, and I'll see you back in about, 20 minutes. 20 minutes? Okay.
Okay, I think everyone is here.
Yeah, all the rooms are closed, so
Yeah,
folks should be
great.
back. Mhm.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, thank you, everyone. We know that you have a great conversation time. So I want to ask you who wants to start sharing their reflections or any ideas or so that you share into the breakout rooms.
Start by showing back what my group discussed. We were in breakout room 1. In terms of the thematic areas of focus for funding, a lot of what was touched upon by Annabelle from United Way was that anything related to poverty relief is something that's very important for a lot of communities. And something else that we talked about was climate change adaptation and mitigation. So especially now, so many communities across Canada historically aren't really equipped to mitigate the effects of climate change for things like flooding, for things like wildfires and smoke. And with the heat domes, causing a lot of people to pass away a few years ago in Vancouver, which sounds very dystopian. That was something that was really important for communities as well. And in terms of, I guess, the people or entities that are receiving investments, we talked a lot about platforming groups that are less visible in communities. And so groups without this visibility in the community often have harder barriers or bigger barriers to accessing funding, traditional, I guess, models of funding. And one of these barriers, I guess, is for a lot of funds from smaller community organizations or youth-led organizations, a requirement is to have a legal, I guess, registration as some sort of entity, whether it be a nonprofit status or social enterprise status. And this is something that is an added barrier for a lot of projects and community-led efforts who find it hard to navigate these, I guess, like legal proceedings, especially when they're already on the front line of a lot of community actions and community wealth building. They don't have the resources and time to pursue this more like back-end administrative end of things. So I guess that kind of segued into our discussion for the second question when we were talking about the different demographics that this capital might support. So looking at smaller and medium size, really community centric and hyper localized, I think, efforts was something that we all thought was important.
Thank you, Annabelle. Great. Someone else want to share the information that you will find out in your groups? You also could send to the chat the information if you want to share.
I already put art in the chat, Carla.
I'm going to.
What was discussed in our group?
Thanks, Mandana.
You're welcome.
Mandana, do you want to read the chat?
Sure, I can speak to it if you want.
Yeah.
I just want to see if anyone else from the group, Michi or Primitiva, do you want to speak or you want me to speak? I don't hear from
you. Can go ahead, that's okay.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, thanks.
So I think what was discussed in the group that, is that the result or how success looks like or outcome, they just want to see some change in the community in terms of creating better well-being, more well-being for the community members, better jobs, opportunities for growth, employment, education. Those are the, like I would say, the long-term outcome that people wanted to see, but also in the short run and like medium term, there are things like building better connection among the community member through this entrepreneurial endeavors, like getting people to know each other. For example, if someone needs to barter service, people know who is doing what, they can barter service. If someone said if they need a childcare, they can go to someone in the community and ask to take care of their child because they know each other, they know they got connected to these businesses. And also creating closer bond between generations, intergenerational connection and passing the wisdom of generation, both sides, like from young to older generation and the other side. And also, I think there was a conversation about we really need the stories of hope and success, especially for the younger generation. They really need hope. Things doesn't seem very hopeful these days. So I think some success story would be nice to have in that local community or in that community wherever it serves. So those are some of the things that was shared in our group. And please feel free to add Michi and Primitiva if I missed anything.
Thank you. Those are both very, very helpful. I love the community-based pieces, though they were nice, I think a nice contrast between sort of the climate focus of the first group and more the sort of the welfare of the community in general of the second group. I'm just curious if there's anything else that people would want to follow up on as we sort of close this first session of the practice. Any reflections on how you think it went? Anything you'd like to change as we move forward with this? We will have this general structure will be a guest speaker with a Q&A, short PowerPoint presentation by us on one general theme, followed by the guest speaker Q&A, and then breakout rooms with those pointed questions that I presented in the PowerPoints. The purpose of which these community practices to really get feedback from the community so that we can move forward with the design of the fund. We've also already got a good idea of the outcomes based, what a successful sort of fund looks like in terms of some of the emphasis you have placed on community specific climate achievable goals and some of the space specific types of geographies that we're looking at and neighborhoods that I got. So we'll be taking those in plus the other notes that Carla collected. And the thing is, we'll be then bringing it back to the next community of practice saying, is this what you said? Anything to add? Can we move forward with this in terms of, you know, what a successful outcomes for this social fund would look like? So please, and if you have any other additional thoughts after this session and before the next June 19th session, I believe is the next one, please feel free to email the team. And that, I think, Carla, any concluding? I'd love to give someone out there, a community member, just to help send us off the last couple of minutes. Any concluding thoughts from anybody out there? Any community members who want to have the last word here, please? Please.
Hi, Randall. It's Kadeen again. I was waiting because I'm always willing to speak if nobody else is going to, but just to say in our small group conversation, we're really optimistic about, you know, what the opportunities or the potential for what this can bring to our communities, and all the ways that people can be more supported to be successful and to rebuild the profile. I think at least, you know, in our underserved, you know, our underserved communities, to rebuild a profile around what our young people are doing, what they're capable of, and where they, you know, they see themselves going for the future. So yeah, we were just pretty excited about what the potential is for this. So we thank for the conversation and the opportunity to continue to learn, to keep learning and working and building this together. So.
Thanks, Kadeen. Anybody else? I mean, the potential is there, but the potential depends on us really setting the agenda. We know the investors, a lot of the impact investors, and if we don't define community, they will define community for us. They will define the community pieces for us if we don't define them. So thanks everyone for helping today. We're moving forward. We've got your reflections. We've got the chat. We've got the session recorded, which we will be, besides posting, we will be, Carla, myself, Cuddy, we will be reviewing this session and taking away